back to another episode of Beating Alpha. This is episode 157, and we have a very special guest. His name is Anthony Vicino. So Anthony is a serial entrepreneur who has helped build multiple multi-million-dollar companies from the ground up by creating efficient systems to scale, utilize value-based content marketing strategies, and always focusing on providing exceptional end-user experiences. He's the best-selling author, investor, and small business owner who joined forces with Dan Kruger in 2019 to create Invictus Capital and have since syndicated $7 million worth of multifamily real estate. And again, for more information, you have to get in contact with Anthony and ask the questions that you want to hear from him, answers from. So that's going to be Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube channel is going to be there as well. And Anthony, I just want to say a big thank you for coming on to this episode.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And to the audience, if you have questions after this show, feel free to reach out, hit us up. We love answering questions.
Here you go. Here you go. So make sure to drop those questions. So, because that's what the show is all about. I want you guys to get in contact with the people that we have on the show, because it's not only this episode. Make sure to keep those connections going after as well. So question for you is, again, can you take us back to the point of becoming this kind of serial entrepreneur? I mean, have you always had this kind of gene DNA in you, or was there some sort of person or event that kind of influenced you to pursue the marketing or real estate business?
A lot of people have these entrepreneurial backstories where when they were a kid, they would sell lemonade or they would pull flowers out of their neighbor's yard and then sell them back to the person. And that was not me at all, not even remotely. But the one thing that I always was a really bad employee. Working for other people just never really aligned well with my personality. I like to have my freedom. I like to be in control of my time. And I'm a very not a maverick, but a maverick personality where I just need to be doing my thing. And if it's my thing, then I can work really hard at that. But if it's working for somebody else, I don't work very hard. I'm kind of lazy. So from a very early age, I always knew this employee path wasn't going to really work out for me. My dad saw that too. So he actually pushed me into writing, and he wanted me to be an author. So for a number of years, I was a science fiction and fantasy author. I published 12 novels, and that was a really great learning experience. And I really enjoyed that. But when I started getting into businesses, that was more by accident than anything else. I was in San Francisco. My first business was a window washing company. There's a lot of windows to wash out there. And so that was a really cool opportunity of, figuring out how do we brand and market this thing? How do we get ourselves in front of customers and create a meaningful service for these people that's, fast and seamless? And what that did was it ignited in me this love for building systems. And more so than building businesses, I really like seeing how systems plunk together to create something even bigger. So 1 + 1 = 10, right? And so that's been my entrepreneurial journey. I've now started, I'm involved with a manufacturing company here in Minnesota. We produce polyurethane rock climbing holds, and that's, again, a very complicated system. What I love about real estate, though, is that it's really simple. At its core, it's like Lego pieces. There's only so many ways that the Legos fit together, but you can build an infinite variety of structures with those Legos once you understand the basics. And so that's what led me into real estate. And yeah, we've just been building from there.
That is awesome. And the journey continues until this day. And, after this episode is going to be done, is going to continue from there too. I mean, so that is awesome, because definitely it's a journey. And, for most of the people, of course, you want to have these destinations when you come to, to your personal goals that you have for yourself and for the business. But, you always grow on, basically. That's what I'm saying. So can you take us because, again, you're doing kind of different things. And, before the interview started, it was what we can talk about today. Because, again, you're a serial entrepreneur and you're doing kind of, different things in different industries. So first of all, talking about the real estate, 2019, so not long ago, created the Invictus Capital with your partner, Dan. So can you take us through that period? How did you, decide it? Can you talk about your decision-making process on, why and how have you decided to create this company?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so for me, my real estate background, you could go all the way back to my college days. We fixed and flipped single family houses. I really did not like the construction aspect. I can swing a hammer, but I can't hit a nail. So after a couple of those, quickly eliminated that as a possible option for the future. Nope, not doing fix and flips. Fast forward a couple of years later, I got passively involved in a couple of quads with a friend who was doing all the active management. And this was at the time not something that was even on my radar as a career opportunity. It was just an investment opportunity with a buddy, saw this thing, and he was doing all the work. Fast forward a couple of years from there, and this is really where the journey began for me down real estate. And the story that I tell people is that I was driving into Minneapolis downtown one day, and the skyline was there in front of me. The sunset was behind it, and it was this really picturesque scene. And I was looking at the skyscrapers, and I was struck with the question, what does it take to buy a skyscraper? And now I don't necessarily have any interest in buying a skyscraper, but that question was really interesting to me at that moment because I had no clue who buys these things, who owns these things, what's that even look like? And so it sent me down this rabbit hole of learning all about real estate, which brought me back down to multifamily real estate in particular, which really struck my fancy because of how simple the business model was. And once you understood that, you could go, the sky was the limit. You could build a skyscraper effectively with that. So what I did was I wanted to start small. So I went and I bought a triplex, and I wanted to learn the systems. I wanted to manage it myself. I wanted to learn about how to work with tenants and how to effectively run this small business. And I did that. And about 9 months later, refinanced it. And that was the moment where I was like, okay, we need to go bigger because I'm not a fan of the small stuff. And the reason was the way the building was valued is based on comparables. And so within 9 months, without doing any work on the property itself, the property appraised for $75,000 more than what I had purchased it for. So just in 9 months, I didn't do any work. It just had this massive appreciation. And that was great for me. But it also highlighted the fact that it wasn't born off the back of me doing any work. I didn't add value. I didn't decrease expenses or anything like that. So it was kind of just at the whim of what the other houses in the area were selling for. So from there, I was like, okay, we need to go bigger into multifamily, where the loans and the valuation method is based off of, net operating income divided by cap rate. And so you can drive the value up by increasing the rent or decreasing expenses. And I like that because it's much more of a meritocracy where you're rewarded for running these properties well. And so from there, I joined forces with Dan Kruger. Dan had already had about maybe 35 units spread across 5 buildings under management of his own at that point. And we took down a syndication of 32 units that we closed back in January of this year. That was our first deal that we did together. And that was the form of Invictus Capital. And we just closed yesterday or the day before on our second syndication, which was another 30 units here in the Twin Cities. So I'm just bringing the portfolio up to around 110 units now.
Got it. So again, congratulations on that, on closing a second deal. And again, what market are we talking about? You mentioned?
Yep. So we're focused up here in the Twin Cities in the North Minnesota. We're in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And we do that because we're vertically integrated. We do all the property management in-house. We have staff that handles that for us. And so we try to cluster all our properties within a certain radius so we can get scales and efficiency there.
Got it. Yeah, it definitely makes sense if you're vertically integrated. So from that point, like, are you going to continue to actively to look for deals in Minnesota, or are you planning to branch out to different markets at some point?
Yeah, at the moment, our plan is to stay in Minnesota and continue scaling. We have really ambitious, 3 and 5 year goals. And so we're going to be pursuing those for the next couple of years here in the cities. And then if it makes sense, so once we achieve that scale, I think we'll pull up and we'll look around at the landscape and say, does it make sense to start to branch out offices into other markets? But one of the things that we're big on is really understanding what market that you're investing in. And there's no market that you understand better than the one you live in. And so for us, we have a competitive advantage investing in our backyard here. And so right now we're not too eager to leave that competitive advantage on the side.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's a kind of common sense, thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So invest where you live. So at the same time, talking about the market where you're at in Minnesota, how does that compare to the surrounding markets, surrounding states?
Really strong, actually. So this is something that people are always surprised when they learn about the Twin Cities. We've had a really rough go in the news cycle, I would say, this year with everything that's been happening here. But Minnesota has, or the Twin Cities in particular, has really strong economic foundations. So we have 14 Fortune 500 companies just within the Twin Cities here. So we have and amongst that, it's a really diverse economic base. So we're looking at some technology, some agriculture. We're looking at a lot of healthcare, and we're looking at a lot of universities. So people, there's a lot of jobs here that spread across a lot of different markets that aren't correlated. So what we see then is if we back test into 2008 with the big financial crisis, Minneapolis performed incredibly well during that period, specifically multifamily. Like we took a little bit of a dip, but we were right back at it in 2010 and beyond. And so the recovery was really quick and swift. And so people are surprised to learn that, but there's also a lot of really interesting reasons to live here beyond just the economic, which is we're consistently rated the #1 city for bike trails or for the healthiest communities. And that's a strange thing considering that 8 months out of the year we're covered in snow. But for whatever reason, Minnesotans just know how to get out there and enjoy life. And there's just really good access to nature and just really high quality of life amenities nearby. And then the final thing that I'll point out with this market that's really interesting that I'm really psyched on is the fact that we have a really high median income and a really low cost of living. So that makes the affordability index very, very solid. So that means your dollar can go much further here. If you're making a $70,000 per year, only a smaller portion of that's going to your rent. Whereas, when you live in San Francisco, you could be making 100 grand a year, but you might be living, under the poverty line. And I use air quotes there because, it's silly to say under the poverty line at 100K, but there's all sorts of articles that talk about that particular case study.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're going to continue, and of course you said you do to look for deals, and of course we can talk about those deals, the type of deals you're going to be looking for in Minnesota. So what do you see happening, let's say with the jobs, and again, with the trends, let's say, a year or 2 or 5 from now, like what are the biggest employers are we talking about in let's say in the Twin City?
Yeah, so up here we have Best Buy headquarters and Target headquarters. Cargill, the largest privately owned company in the United States, is stationed here as well. We have 3M, General Mills. And so just right there, a huge diversity. If you look at the University of Minnesota, I believe it's the 3rd largest university in the country in terms of population. And so a really wide economic base there.
Okay, so talking about the deals itself, like what you're going to be looking for, because you mentioned there was a 35 and 50 something unit that you closed right
so
now?
a 32 and a 30 unit. Yeah, and
okay.
for us, we really want to be targeting that 50 to 150 unit size. But here in the Twin Cities, the larger portfolios, they're not quite so frequent. So a lot of the city here is a little bit older inventory. So you take what you can get. And for us, we're deal size agnostic. If the deal makes sense, we're going to look at it. And so that's what the opportunity that was in front of us on this last deal is 30 units, a little bit smaller than what we're interested in, but the numbers were so good. It was in such a great area. And we're getting it at such a great basis that it was a no-brainer that we should pursue it. So moving forward, our goal is to be in that 50 to 150 size, really targeting that Class B, Class C value add that everybody talks about. But right now with COVID, we've kind of shifted our strategy. So on our last deal that we did, that was a very heavy value add. We had to go in there, we had to clear out all the tenants, put in some renovations and bring it up. And that was great. There's a lot of meat on the bone in that type of deal. But that's really scary right now with the COVID environment and eviction moratoriums. If you have this need to deploy a ton of capital, and it's not clear if you can get the tenants out or what's going to happen with the jobs market here in the near future, that could be kind of a precarious situation. So we made a move towards buying a little bit more of a stable asset in a really affluent area, a really solid asset that's already stabilized. We have the ability to go in there and increase rent and drive value, but it's on our time frame. We don't have to do that from day one. It's cash flowing because we bought it at such a good basis. So we can be a little bit slower and strategic with when we deploy our CapEx. We can wait and see what 2021 does. If it gets really bad like it was in 2020, if we do another lockdown, we can sit on our capital and kind of ride it out. If everything kind of opens up again and things look like it was back in 2019, then great, we can deploy our capital. We can really hit the jet fuel and take the deal to the next level.
Got it. Good. So again, when you mentioned like what's happening right now with Minnesota, that as far as I do understand, there's not a lot of like, it's not a huge sales volume that we're talking about, like that compares to maybe some other states. So
Mhm.
there's those deals not changing hands, that often. So how do you go about when it comes to finding the deals? Because there's a lot of kind of real estate investors now complaining that it's harder to find deals, of course, because of the what's happening with the interest rates and politics and elections and different things. So how do you go about to find the deals? I mean, how did you find the last one, the 35 unit?
Yeah, those are killer questions, and those are the ones that are on everybody's minds. If you're out there, deal flow is everything, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you nailed it on the head there when you said that the sales volume up here in the Twin Cities is a little bit less than you would see in the really hot markets like Phoenix or Nashville, right? And so, what tends to happen up here in Minnesota is things trade locally, or they trade with the really big external national size brands. And so, what that means is if you're a local and you know the other players in the game, the 10 guys who own everything in the cities, then you're going to be well positioned to acquire those as they're looking to change change hands. And that's actually one of the situations that arose with this last deal for us. And so that was born off the back of broker relations. And so I'll touch on two different ways, because both of our last two deals, they came in completely different manners. But this last deal came through a broker relation. Dan has a side business, which was nutrition coaching. If you've ever seen Dan, he looks like he's like pure brick house. He's like a very muscular, strong dude, very into fitness. And he'd been working with a particular community here in the Twin Cities on nutrition coaching. And one of those guys that he had worked with a number of years back actually ended up becoming one of the top brokers here in the Twin Cities in multifamily. And so we had this really good relationship with this guy. He knew that we were young, what we were looking for, and he had this portfolio, and he put us in front of the seller and sold us to the seller and said, hey, you should take this deal, even though our deal wasn't necessarily the top dollar bid. They could have gotten more. But what we were bringing to the table and what the seller was looking for were in alignment. So this guy, he's an old school player who's been in the game since the 90s, and he has 1,400 units spread across the Twin Cities. And he's looking to get out of the game and transition out of his portfolio. And he's looking to have a headache-free transaction process as he's offloading these properties. And what he's looking for is that next young group that he can transact with consistently over time, that he knows they're not going to come back to the table and renegotiate in the 11th hour. They're not going to nuke the deal because they couldn't raise the capital and they couldn't do what they said they would. So he wants to have that assurity. And so the broker put us forth to the seller saying, hey, these guys, they can be that for you. And so now we have this great relationship with the seller. We have a good deal pipeline because that really sets us up nicely for future opportunities. When he goes to sell it, we're the first people he thinks of. Whereas the first deal that we got this year, the deal that we closed back in January, that actually came to us from another broker who saw our thought leadership content that we put out there. So we do a podcast called Multifamily Investing Made Simple. We put out a lot of articles. We've written a book. And he found that content and just cold called Dan and said, hey, I've seen your content. I have this property over here. Would you be interested in it? And what's interesting about that was this broker, he wasn't really a multifamily guy. He was more of a residential who had a multifamily property fall into his lap, and he didn't really know what to do with it. So he cold called us. We looked at it and we're like, this is a unicorn deal. This is too good to be true. We actually thought he was like pulling our leg at first, but the more we dove into it, the more we talked to the seller, the more it became clear, like, oh, this is real. And that proved to be a fantastic opportunity. So, those deals came by different paths. One was through putting yourself out there into the universe, putting out content and having that magnetic effect attract what you're looking for. The other side was much more networking and building really good quality relationships, and not always looking at and asking, hey, what do I stand to benefit from this relationship right now? But always being good to people and treating them with respect and adding value to their lives whatever way you can. And then trusting, the universe has a way of bringing things back around on these long time cycles sometimes. So that's how those deals kind of came about.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful. I love the fact that you're using both of the approaches, kind of the traditional, original, networking, having people on lunches and, looking to ways that you can add value to those people, through networking and meeting them. And at the same time, leveraging social media marketing and bringing value through social medias. And again, like the story that, you said, people get in contact with you through social media, which of course we have to talk about as
Mhm.
well. But first of all, like for the people who are watching and they never heard about real estate syndication, multifamily syndication, can you give us like 10,000, feet view, like what does this syndication look like and how people can get involved with it?
Yeah, so a syndication is the way to think about this is a group of investors are getting together, they're pooling their resources, and those resources could be time, experience, and money to buy an asset that those individuals couldn't have purchased on their own. And so within that, we then create a structure where there's two classes of partners. There's the general partner, and the general partner is going to be bringing the time and they're going to be bringing the experience. And in the other bucket, we have the limited partners, and those guys, they're bringing the capital. And so the general partners, they're going to be putting together the deal. They're going to have those broker relationships. They're going to get the deal under contract. They're going to put up the earnest money. They're going to get the deal closed. And in exchange, then the LPs, the limited partners, they just bring in money to the table. So the analogy that we use is the jumbo jet analogy. It's like if you want to fly across the country, you're going to pay a ticket or pay for a ticket on a plane, and you're going to sit in the back and you're just going to get on the plane. You're going to get flown from destination A and delivered at destination B. And so you're the limited partner. You're putting your money in and you're going along for the ride. And then the general partners are the pilot, and they're the guys that, they're sitting in the front of the plane, they're navigating, they're making sure that it's actually on course and that everything's smooth sailings. And then they're, exiting the deal. So they're the guys that do all the work. The LPs are the guys that put the money in. So that's the syndication in a nutshell.
Got it. Yeah. So when it comes to, again, investing in those type of deals, like how does it work for the people? Like, do you have to be, like accredited, like especially for your personal deals? Like, how does it work? How do you structure those deals?
Yep. So that's going to depend on how the deal is structured, and each deal is a little bit different. So if you do what's called a 506B, that's a securities registration. That's going to be so that you can solicit to non-accredited and accredited investors alike. And so a non-accredited investor, rather an accredited investor, for maybe the listeners that don't know what that is, that's somebody who has a net worth over $1 million, or without including the value of their primary residence, or they're making an income of 250,000 or more per year. If they're married, it's 300,000 or something to that effect. And so you have to be making, kind of a lot of money there to qualify as an accredited. What that does then is, for everybody that doesn't hit that kind of high standard, you're non-accredited investor. And so with a 506B offering, we can put that out there. We can bring in some non-accredited investors, but the caveat is that we have to have a substantial pre-existing relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're a friend or they're a family, then we have that relationship. They can put some money into the deal, but we can't just go out there soliciting this deal to the general public saying, hey, come invest in this. And that's because the SEC, they want to protect that class of investor that might not be as sophisticated or in a position financially to just put all this money into a deal and potentially get bamboozled and lose it. So that's a 506B, and sometimes we do that type of offering. The other type of offering is a 506C, and that is you can only solicit accredited investors. But the plus side is that you can generally solicit that, whether you can put it on the internet and say, hey, we have this offering. The downside for the accredited investor is that they have to have a third-party verification process. So that's kind of a little bit more rigmarole for them. I know a lot of accredited investors don't really like to jump through that hoop. So if we can, we like to use a 506B personally, because honestly, we don't need to be pumping our deals out there into the social media, into the internet and marketing at large. And so the 506B offering works just fine for us.
Mm-hmm. Here we go. And it's a little bit funny at the same time, because we're just saying that the SEC kind of, when it has those regulations for 506B, they want to make sure that the people don't lose money, when they invest in syndication deals. But when they invest in the stock market and Wall Street, that's fine. That's no problem.
It's fine. Yeah, this is something that Dan and I, we were at a lunch with an investor the other day, and Dan gets really riled up about this, because if you look at the explanation, the reason why they say that we protect the non-accredited investors, and then you look at the actions, it doesn't really pan out all that well, because it all comes down to look who stands to benefit, where's the money coming from. Wall Street is still this place where anybody can, regardless of how much money they make, just go on Robinhood or wherever and make some trades, right? Nothing's protecting them from that. Yeah. And so it's just about where the incentives are. And these private placements in real estate, Wall Street doesn't really benefit from that. And so it's not part of their marketing engine. It's not part of their policy program either in terms of lobbying in the government.
Exactly. So talking about your personal, marketing content strategies. So can you take us, like, how do you go about, on social media, and what type of value-based content do you produce, and, to make sure that those, sophisticated or accredited investors will invest with you?
Mm-hmm. So we take a pretty, I would say, audience-focused approach. We want to look at things from the audience's perspective and say, what questions do they have? What are the ways that they consume content? Okay, how can we now answer those questions in a way that they're likely to consume? So we have YouTube, we have podcasts, we have written articles, we have books, and we're on all the platforms: LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, wherever. And so the point is, when you're looking at marketing, is you want to be where your target audience is, and that is right now social media land. But you don't need to be at all those places. You just need to start someplace and focus there until you get some traction, and then maybe add on another one of those, or two or three. And then when you look at the content itself, we like to say that people either read, they listen, or they watch. And so you need to have a piece of content that can hit everybody at different points. And so, I'm a big reader. So if you give me an article, great, I'm going to be psyched. If you give me a podcast, yeah, I love podcasts. I'll listen to that when I drive, but I'm not going to consume it as quickly. I'm going to be a little bit slower. If it's a video, Dan's going to watch that all day long. So what we like to do is we like to create what we call pillar content, which is typically like a video or a podcast, and it's a little bit longer form. And we're really trying to target in on a topic that's of value to somebody. So really talking about maybe, hey, what's a cap rate and why does that matter? How do some investors get that wrong? How do they get it right? Why does that matter to a passive investor? And then taking that piece of content and then splicing it down, creating written articles out of that, and then little snippets that can be used in social media. So, you don't want to put a 10-minute video on Facebook necessarily, maybe a 1-minute clip with some captions. So somebody sitting on the toilet and just scrolling through with the volume off, they see those captions and they start watching. And that's actually, one of the ways that you actually in the Beating Alpha really came onto my radar was the use of social media, and it hit me right where I was. And I was like, hey, this is great. I love it. So that's kind of our broad approach to it. But everything that we do, we always go from the focus of educating. If we can educate and entertain, perfect. But at its core, we want to be educating. So what we talk about internally is edutainment, education, entertainment, fuse those two. And if you can entertain while you're educating so that somebody doesn't realize that they just learned about this thing, they were just, having a good time, that's I would say the golden chalice.
That is awesome. And I love this, which you say educating. That is awesome. That is a good word. So again, and for the people who are looking to get that answer, why cap rate is so important for passive investors, if you want that question answered right now, I think it's going to be 2-hour video.
Oh, it's big.
Yeah, I do think you have to go to the YouTube channel and of course subscribe to the Multifamily Investing Made Simple podcast that you can find on the website, on the YouTube channel, of course, for those type of answers. So, but personally, like guys, because you kind of, diversified when it comes to the marketing strategy, but for the beginners, let's say that somebody just like you who are looking to get involved into multifamily or house flipping, could be something, a different asset class, but real estate. Like what social media platform would you recommend for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's one we get a lot. I think a lot of people are wondering what's the golden bullet? Which one is the platform that I need to be on? And
yeah,
honestly,
we want 1 + 1 equals 10. We want those answers.
Yeah, but honestly, there is no one platform. So I just wrote an article actually for Jake and Gina. If you go over to their website and check it out, it's all about how to build a thought leadership platform, and outlined 4 of the key steps that you should really be thinking about. I would say if from one is podcasting. Podcasting has an enormous reach right now. It's very, very powerful. So if you're going to be on one platform and only one platform, I would think very strongly about starting your own podcast because it's very, very powerful. 2, in terms of the social media platforms, again, there is no right answer. It's about what's the most consistent with your personality. Which one do you jive with the most? Maybe that's LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. It's a little bit more professional. The level of conversation is a little bit higher level from a business perspective. And I find that it's a little bit more positive than some of the other social media platforms, where that's not to say anything wrong against Instagram or Facebook. It's just very different mediums. So If you're more of a visual person or all about the videos, then Instagram's going to be very powerful for you, and Facebook can be very powerful. If you're all about blogging and writing a little bit longer form thoughts, Facebook's going to be great because they have a much longer, I would say, text limit that you can create blogs in your posts there. If you're a long form video content creator and you're great at making videos, go to YouTube. It's the second biggest search engine in the world for a reason. So it's all about finding but the key is you got to be consistent. And it's going to take a long time to get any kind of meaningful traction. So what you need to do is you need to commit to saying, in this next year, I'm going to put out content consistently. I don't know what that means for you. It could be daily, it could be weekly or monthly, whatever it is. But you need to set that consistent goal and then you need to hit it. And you're going to need to just kind of write off the first year, maybe 2 years, and say, I'm going to get zero traction with this. Nobody's going to watch. I'm going to be screaming into the void. Everybody's going to be ignoring me. It's going to feel like a complete waste of time. But if you stick with it long enough, you will eventually start to gain traction. But you'll never get to that point unless you consistently apply force over time.
Mm-hmm. Got it. That's a very great advice. So love it. Thanks, Anthony. And again, coming back to your point, which you said before, kind of, taking two approaches, the marketing approach and the original approach, which is networking and, building the business. So, and you kind of give us advice on marketing, how to find your strategy there. But what about finding the right business partner? Would you give any tips or maybe strategies on how somebody who's looking to become let's say a GP, to run, multifamily business, how do they know if they're going to find the right partner? Is there a process behind it?
Yeah, partnerships are super difficult. That's the most difficult thing. Charlie Munger says, and this is slightly different, but he talks a lot about if you can only be working on the principal agent problem, only focus on that thing. But at its root core there, that message for me is people are difficult. When you're working with people and getting interests aligned and expectations moving in the same direction and being on the same wavelength, incredibly difficult. And when we do our bios, we talk about all our successes, but we don't really put in there all of our failures. And so for all those businesses that I've had success in, I've had an equal number or more that have failed horribly. And most of those failures were due to improperly aligned partnerships from the beginning. And so I can share a story about that. So my first attempt at real estate was actually with a very close friend. We're best friends. And we had done a different business together, and that didn't work out so well. So we thought maybe this one would be a better fit for us. And again, it went down in flames before it ever got started. And one of the things that we found was we were both really good at the same thing and really bad at the same thing. And so we were both trying to do the things that we're good at, and the things that we're bad at just kept getting pushed to the side. And we kept kind of looking at each other because we didn't set clear accountabilities about who was going to pick up which balls. And eventually that just kind of spiraled out of control because we didn't set the clear expectations of who's doing what. So moving forward, then I was always looking for partners who were complementing my strengths and my weaknesses. So I'm very good at very particular things. I'm very bad at most everything else. So if I can play to my strengths and I can find a partner who plays to my weaknesses, that's a match made in heaven. That's what Dan and I have. But you can't just go out into the universe looking for a partner. It doesn't really work that way. It's a lot like going to the bar to try and find your wife, or you're up to somebody to be like, will you marry me? Do you want to go? Will you be my girlfriend? It doesn't work like that. It comes off as being very desperate. And so what you need to do, you need to work on yourself, and you need to make yourself the type of person that other people want to partner with. And so that is, you have high energy, you have high integrity, you have a high attention to detail or focus or whatever it is. Like, you need to make yourself a desirable partner first, and then suddenly the universe has a way of bringing those partners around. I think the Buddhists say, when the student is ready, the master will appear. And it's the same thing when it comes to partnerships. When you're ready, the right partner will appear. And so for Dan and I, we met at a conference, let's say last year, a year and a half ago or so. And we just looked at each other. We're both really into fitness. And so that was something that we were able to gravitate towards and have a conversation about. We got lunch, but we weren't really thinking about partnerships at that point. We were just looking and saying, hey, this guy's interesting. Good relationship. I want to hang out with him more because I've learned some things. He challenges some of my perspectives, and I'm growing because of that. And so in the months that followed, we just kept the relationship going, kept going out and getting coffee or getting lunch, and just kept the conversation. And at some point, it started to align where we looked at it and said, we have really good complementary skills. We have the same desired end state. We're going towards the same goal, and we're both working towards it at the same speed. Let's see what this would look like to work together. And it's been a great relationship ever since, but it didn't really start looking for a partnership. And I think that's where a lot of people maybe go wrong from the beginning, is that they're looking too aggressively for partners, and it comes off as desperate. So.
And again, another great advice and story. So, that's beautiful. How did you been able to find, one each other? And again, it's through being ready through that process, and of course,
Mhm.
leveraging your own personal kind of, strengths, and to make sure they can build this business. So coming back to like the business operations, which of course, like we talked about marketing, partnerships, and if you go back to the business, like the kind of important piece is, property management. And you kind of mentioned that you have this vertically integrated property management, company. So like, when have you decided to vertically integrate that? Because, I talk with a lot of multifamily syndicators, and they have, a couple thousand units and they still hire the third party one. So how did you, made that decision to create the company?
Yeah, that's another really good question. I think it's hard if you have a couple thousand units already and now you're starting to think about maybe we want to bring property management in-house. That's a much harder task than if you build it out from the ground up at the very beginning. And so my approach to our other business, which is light manufacturing, that has always been, let's control as much of the process as possible, because by controlling that process, we can control the end product that much better. And if our competition is all outsourcing that, then they're always going to be at the mercy of both the market, but then also that supplier. And so we never wanted to be in that position. For Dan, he did his very first deal. He had a third property manager for the first 6 months or so, and it became clear very quickly that it wasn't going to work out. He's a little bit too much of a control freak, and he came to the realization that, hey, I could do this better on my own. Nobody's going to care more than I do, so let's start building this myself. And so we from the very beginning said, let's build this from the ground up. And it's much easier when you do that, because you might not have all the systems in place from day one, but you have more of a runway to get them fine-tuned and running, so that by the time you hit 1,000 units, you're a well-oiled machine. But if I was at 1,000 units now and thinking about going in-house with my management, I think it would be just too daunting of a task. I'd probably, unless I had a relationship or a partnership with somebody who came from a property management background that you could hand the keys to the car to and say, run this thing, go build it for me, I would be very daunted by it. But because we started from the very beginning, we've learned the process at each step. It's much more tangible. It's much more easy to wrap our heads around. And the mistakes that we've made at the beginning, they were smaller mistakes, so we're not likely to make them later when they're bigger mistakes. And so for us, when we made our first hire, that was a really key critical moment. We hired a guy who had a lot of experience as a broker and as a property manager. And that was key. We hired somebody who knew stuff that we didn't, and we leveraged his experience. We put him in a position to succeed, set clear expectations and accountabilities, and then said, run. And he's done that marvelously so far.
Here you go. Here you go. That's awesome. I love the fact that you're doing that currently. It's a little bit, different approach that a lot of the operators doing, at the same time, but it does make a lot of sense. And again, one thing, guys and girls, and that's how you make the value add based content right there, So I'm very happy that you've been today on the show with Anthony, because all the advices pieces that you gave away, it's very beneficial for a lot of people. First of all, those who are looking to start their own personal real estate business, those who want to invest passively. So, and of course, for those type of questions, get in contact with Anthony. Of course, all these links are going to be down below for you to do so. So I kind of have the last question for you, and it's a shame that Dan is not around, so because I would love to hear his take on that too, but maybe we can do that next time. So, like, when it comes down to your personal legacy, like, what are you looking to get accomplished?
That's a fantastic question. I coach a lot of my goals in terms of the impact that we can have on the people around us. And so in one industry of the manufacturing, that's in the rock climbing industry. And I'm very passionate about outdoor sports. But one of the things that's always been difficult in that space is that there's not a lot of career opportunities or career paths for people that want to dedicate their entire life to that industry. And so one of my goals there was, let's try and build a company that we can employ 1,000 people with meaningful career opportunities in the outdoor space. And so that's what we're building over there. And with multifamily, a lot of people talk about, I want 1,000 units, or I want $100 million in assets under management, all these things. And I've always tried to coach it in terms of, I want to provide meaningful housing opportunities for 1,000 people. So I want to help 1,000 families. I want to, be a part of their living experience and be able to positively impact it. And so that's what I think about as I go through my goals, is not so much thinking about the units or the dollar amounts or the growth. I try to put it in context of how many people are we serving, and what does it look like to serve them to the best of our ability. And if we can do that at the end of the day, then that's a happy legacy for me.
Yeah, it sounds like a happy legacy. And again, I'm happy that, myself here with Beating Alpha, I'm part of it, at least a little bit. And the people who are watching, getting involved with that, when you're with your personal legacy, getting all this great information. That, like, one question, like one thing that I want to ask you guys and girls who are watching this episode, to pass this legacy along, again, to the friend of yours, that person who is looking for those real estate, investing type advices, strategies, there's a few mindset shifts there involved as well, motivation. So make sure to do that. Again, Anthony, for you personally, want to say big thank you again for coming over today and sharing all these great tips. And, it's awesome what you guys are currently working on. And I'm sure you're going to have a big legacy involved after you as well. So it's a pleasure. Thanks, man. I really appreciate you having me. Thank you, guys. So again, make sure to pass this episode along. And as always, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.